Ladies and gentlemen, day 208 of Russia's invasion and the ninth year of Russia's war against Ukraine. My name is Andriy Shevchenko. On behalf of Medіацентру Ukraine, I would like to welcome all the journalists telling the world about our struggle for freedom. We're talking today to Oleksandr Merezhko, chair of the Foreign Policy and Interparliamentary Cooperation Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Пане Олександре, it would be nice to have a summary to see where we are today in our diplomatic battle. I will perhaps start with the European vector. We've had an important visit of our Brussels friends to Kyiv. What are the news in terms of Brussels, in terms of our EU integration? In terms of parliamentary diplomacy, I see here two aspects. First of all, we're talking about the fact that the parliament is now working hard on adopting laws, passing laws and bills that have to do with our Euro integration. I would just like to give an example of our committee, a meeting of our committee today. We looked at a protocol to the Convention of the European Council on Terrorism, and this is just one example. We are trying to pass the necessary bills and laws and adapt our legal system to the acquis communautaire. The legal system of the European Union. Another way of the work of the parliamentary diplomacy is our work to try and convince the members of the EU, our colleagues, deputies of the European parliaments, to support us on this path of European integration. This is something that both our committee is involved in and friendship groups with the member states of the European Union. So in all of these directions, we're doing work. How would you assess how far ahead have we come in terms of passing the bills necessary to be admitted into the European Union? In terms of percent, could you perhaps give us a percentage? Well, this has been said. We're looking at about 70. We've had about 70%. Now, a central question is, as we recall, are there the so-called seven recommendations? The so-called recommendations as to starting the negotiation process before full membership. We're on our path to meeting these recommendations, and I hope that in the nearest future, we're looking at months, these recommendations will be met. Another direction has to do with our work with our international partners in terms of granting Russia the status of a terrorist state. Why is this important? It's extremely important, but we have to understand two things here. We differentiate between terrorist state and state sponsor of terrorism. If we're looking about the status of state sponsor of terrorism, this only exists in the legal system of the United States, and this can only be decided by the State Department. So basically, we're talking about the U.S. executive and the president. The Congress, or particularly the Senate of the United States, have passed a resolution that supports recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism with all of the legal consequences. However, unfortunately, the executive is unsure. So there are some doubts. Nevertheless, we're trying to convince our friends, our partners, of the necessity of taking the step of recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, and put it on a list with other countries like North Korea or Iran, which sponsor terrorism. By the way, the recent crimes whose traces have been discovered, I mean Izum, the mass burial sites in Izum are precisely the sort of evidence to say that Russia is a state sponsor of terrorism. As for the question of Russia as a terrorist state, that's a political question. For instance, the Parliament of Lithuania in their resolution have already recognized Russia as a state of as a terrorist state, as also we have done in our parliament earlier. But we are interested in having as many countries as possible to recognize, at least politically, to recognize Russia as a terrorist state. This is necessary to completely isolate Russia. Could you tell us, in these past months, how much easier has it become to talk to parliamentaries of other countries and to reach agreements on political support of Ukraine with them? I would like to give you an example. A few days ago, I came back from a work trip. I attended a conference that was entitled European Dialogue. You know, I had the opportunity to talk to my colleagues live, to the different parliamentarians from different European parliaments, and I want to say right off the bat that it became a lot easier because the vast majority of members of parliament of various European parliaments understand who we're dealing with. They understand how dangerous a country Russia is. So I see massive shifts, even compared to what was there 6 months ago. At the same time, there are those who hesitate and they need to be convinced. But on the whole, I would like to stress that there is no, I see no Ukraine fatigue. Vice versa, on the contrary, I see the enthusiasm aimed at providing real help to Ukraine, and I see it growing. What sort of news internationally should we expect in the nearest few weeks? What are your priorities, and what are the priorities for Ukrainian diplomacy? Our chief priority is the question of heavy weapons. We are working with our colleagues. We continue to hold online meetings. We send delegations, or some deputies go to states that have that decision power to provide weapons. Another priority is, of course, the question of European integration. We're continuing to work on that. And it remains on the agenda, and we're also working on that. Our job is to isolate the aggressor state, Russia. Oleksandr Merezhko, head of the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Policy, I thank you for this conversation. And please follow our announcements.